Welcome to the Performance Hall at the John W. Bardo Fine and Performing Arts Center. At this time, please turn off or silence any cell phones or electronic devices and refrain from texting during the performance. Please keep in mind that recording the performance or taking photographs is not permitted. In case of an emergency, please exit through the doors located to the right and left of the stage. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the show.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for coming. My name is John Jika, and I teach here in the School of Art and Design. And the title of, or the event that we're here for is Mark Mothersbaugh Talks. This may be disappointing, but he did not reach a plea bargain with us. So we're going to go ahead anyway. Isn't that right, Mark? Anyway.
Okay.
Some acknowledgments. The co-conspirators of this event. Oh, there he is, Mark. Come on in.
Hey, John.
There you are. Great. Have a seat, please, or stand. This is really relaxed. We've had a great time over several days now, and one thing, to follow up on the idea of plea bargains, our co-conspirators here include some very, very great people. Allison, Morris, and Shuttler. Keep on fumbling that name. I'm sorry. Where is Allison? I am so sorry. Our interim chancellor and amazing supporter of the arts, and George Brown, our dean, sitting next to her. Yep. Great people. Both of them are so extraordinary in terms of their support of the arts. We've got, visiting artists and scholars help support Ideas Without Walls and other events on campus. Go ahead, have a seat, please. Yeah. And, of course, the School of Art and Design, faculty, staff, and students, amazing group of people, and very smart and interesting and productive and very professional, great students. We also have, the university in general, which is, the arts are central to this university, so it's just a wonderful place to work and to have, events like this. In addition, there are two people that I really want to recognize who've done remarkable work, and that is, Clint Harden, is he here? No? Okay, Clint, one of the reasons why Mark is here, in fact, probably the main reason, is we've done this series of silk screens and prints that you see out in the lobby, Star Lobby. And they're not quite finished yet. Mark's going to take them back with him, or we'll send them back. And we'll finish them up, and then part of that series will be part of our collection. So some of the work that you see will be coming back. So that's pretty remarkable. Yeah. So the backgrounds of these are basically Mark had produced these, and then he sent them over here. And our print shop, along with Tom Frazier, of course, who's remarkable, have produced these large-scale digital prints. And then a very, very special thanks to Matt Little. Where's Matt? Matt? Yeah.
Oh, there he is. Yep.
There you go. Our superstar printer, printmaker, and Greg, there's Greg, who helped hang the show out there. So museum staff and artists here have done a remarkable job in making this happen, and it's been just wonderful, a wonderful experience.
I can verify that.
Yeah.
The staff was great.
Yeah.
The kids and the staff, we had a good time the last couple days,
Yeah.
and they were very helpful.
So, I've got some questions here that will start and kind of go through kind of informally. One thing that some of you know is that Mark and I went to school at Kent State at the same time. And we were both in the art department in the studio program. He was a printmaker, I was a printmaker. He worked in silkscreen primarily and took other art courses, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about that too.
Did you work with Dan Roan?
I did work with Dan Roan.
Yeah.
And Bob Culley and Ian Short.
Bob Culley, yeah. Ian Short, yeah.
Right. So we had this great faculty there, and Mark's from Akron, which is just a little bit southeast of Cleveland, and I'm from Cleveland, and so we have a lot in common. And one of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention, maybe to give us some perspective of things, is that that corridor, Northeast Ohio corridor, is a really interesting corridor from the 19th century to the 20th century, and really even now, because it was kind of midway between Chicago and New York. And so a lot of things were happening: industrialization, steel, rubber, back in the turn of the century. That was huge. The music flowed through there in a crazy way. A lot of people considered Northeast Ohio to be a test area for bands coming in from various parts of the country and overseas, from England and other places. David Bowie loved Cleveland. We had a really interesting kind of music scene when we were growing up there. The arts were vital. Cleveland Museum of Art and other kind of relationships to visual art, sculpture, etc. The theater scene was really vibrant with vaudeville going back to the early part of the 20th century. There were so many things that were happening. It was such a dynamic corridor that those of us who grew up with that felt that we were plugged in, and it was phenomenal. So I know this is going back, and one of the things I disagree with most in Thomas Wolfe's statement, "You can never go back home," is I believe you can, and that's why we're here, to go back home. So the first question I'd like to kind of, or just conversation, this is more of a conversation, is one thing we've shared to some extent was, what we were like when we were kids and teenagers and all that stuff about art, and how did that work with you? What kind of art did you experience when you were growing up?
Okay, well, we can go this kind of quick, but I was born into a fog, and I didn't know I couldn't see anything until the end of second grade. I got my eyes checked, and they found out I was legally blind. So I got glasses, and it was like one of those things where in one day you go from never being able to see anything to all of a sudden things are 20/20, and that was the moment when I decided I started drawing, and it was probably about within 24 hours of drawing things, because I was drawing things that I saw for the first time, like roofs of houses and telephone poles and the tops of trees and things like that. So it's like within 24 hours I was drawing, and I had a school teacher that used to, I went to school public school back in the days of corporal punishment. So she thought she could spank me into being an obedient kid, apparently. But this day I was drawing some stuff that I'd seen in my first 24 hours, and she said, "You draw trees better than me." And that was like a big thing for me. So it somehow, so teachers, anybody who's a teacher out there, stuff sometimes sticks. Yeah, just spank them a few times, and then be nice to them. It works. Anyhow, so yeah, so it was like that night I went and dreamt I was going to be an artist, and that was my goal ever since 7 years old.
Let me ask you this, because this was my experience. You remember that show Ghoulardi?
Ghoulardi, of course.
Yeah.
Ghoulardi saved my life.
So some of you may know this, but for those of you who don't, saved my life too. Ernie Anderson played this, well, he had a television show. It was Friday night, right?
Yeah.
And he would show these BC movies of...
1 million years BC, for instance, or
yeah,
a 50-foot tall woman. Or
right,
like
right.
That.
These exaggerated, mostly black and white, I think they were all black and white, movies with dinosaurs eating
My TV
people.
was black and white, so...
Well, we didn't know the difference. But one of the cool things he did, he would always talk through the movies. And, and he would blow up things during the movies.
Oh, and he had a blue screen. I'd never seen blue screen before. So it's like there'd be like, cavemen trying to pick fruit out of a tree, and he'd walk out into the movie and he'd start jumping up with it. Or else there'd be like a saber-toothed tiger, something with big fake tusks taped to it, chasing, like these cavemen through the woods, and then he'd like fall down over a log, and the tiger would jump over him and stuff, and he was, you're right, he was great. That's funny you should bring him up.
He was, so I had a paper route when I was a kid, and he was right around the corner from the paper route. He lived in my neighborhood.
Get the heck out of here.
Yeah, it's true.
He was my hero.
Yeah. So that was well before MTV, and it actually was MTV, wasn't it?
And he did blow things up on TV, and that's what got him in trouble.
Firework,
He taught me. I used to make model car when you're in the 50s. It's like, it's sad, but it's like you go to the store and you buy like a Revell model car, plastic, and you carefully put it together and paint it and everything. But then after I saw Ghoulardi, it's like I'd make this thing, and then before the paint was dry, I already had it out on the sidewalk with a firecracker in it, and it would be ready to explode.
This is what we grew up with, and I can't think of any.
I met him one time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever meet him?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, of course, you lived around the corner. You guys were friends.
Oh, he was from Cleveland, and you were from Akron.
Yeah.
So
He made it to my high school one time.
Yeah.
They had something called donkey basketball. Do you know what that is? I can't even believe that there was ever such a thing existed. But the faculty at my high school, Woodridge High School, and what station was it? WK? I don't remember.
What? WAKR in Akron.
AKR?
That was Akron.
No, the TV station he was on.
Yeah, that was in Cleveland. It
was a Cleveland TV. I can't remember the name of whatever it was.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, Channel 8 or Channel 5 or Channel 3. It was one of those.
It was Channel 5.
Yeah. So Channel 5. They brought all these people that were
right.
Like I think Houlihan, the weatherman, was there,
Yep.
and they brought different people that were on the show, celebrities because they were TV celebrities, down to my school, and they did this thing called donkey basketball to raise money for the school, probably, I guess. And you spread sawdust out on the basketball court, and then you get on the back of a donkey. Everybody did, and it was hilarious because all these people that couldn't play basketball were now sitting on donkeys, trying to play basketball on the back of the donkey. It was the stupidest thing, but it's like. somewhere after the game, after the donkey basketball thing, I was walking down this one corridor to go to my locker before I went home. And I was on my way down this corridor, and there was nobody there except one person was coming the other way. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Goularty. And it was like, you know, the hairs went up on my arms and everything. I was like, oh my God, it's him. You know, because he saved my life, because when I was in junior high and I couldn't drive, I would hide in my basement and watch him on TV at night. You know, because you know that age where you're not old enough to have control of your life, but you know, you're not young enough to believe everything your parents say anymore. So you're just like stuck in prison. And it was like, thank God for Friday night in Goularty. And,
Yeah.
But I saw him walking this way, and I was walking this way, and he had a cigarette. And I'm like, he's smoking a cigarette in school. That's so cool. You know, and he's walking this way, and I'm walking this way. I go, Goularty! And he goes, fuck you. And I was like, Goularty spoke to me. That's funny.
Great.
Yeah. And then he went out. He left us.
Yeah.
And he went to California, and he became like, I found out later, the most well-paid voiceover person, because he had a great voice, and he was like...
He would talk like a ghoulish person, right?
Yeah, but he could like also do this thing where I don't know how to
Goulart.
do that kind of voice.
Yeah,
you know
right,
how it
right.
is. The guys that announce movies and
Yeah,
announce products and things like that, or whatever, every kind of thing. He just had
That's
the right
great.
voice. And then his kid became famous.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Paul Anderson. He did what's that movie with what's it called? Yeah. He did.
Yeah.
And I met him once at some party, and he's like, hey, yeah. And I'm like, I know who you are. And I was like, I know your dad. Your dad was amazing. He goes, I've got all these old cinema scopes of Goularty shows. He goes, would you like to see him? I go, I would love to see him. Call me sometime. And he never did. But somewhere there's all the Goularty things exist.
And that was our life before we went to school, college. When it was cool.
Okay, enough of Goularty.
Yeah. Well, now you see where we're coming from.
Cool with the boom booms. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Purple Kniff.
Yep.
Which was Fink backwards.
Yep.
I
wanted
don't know what
to
it meant.
do.
He wore sunglasses with one lens poked out. and a fright wig.
That's right.
And he just sat on a chair the whole time. That was
Yep.
it. He was like an angry beatnik.
Yep.
Kind of, wasn't he?
I have this quote. One of my heroes is Robert Ventura, the architect. He changed my life. You know, others did too. But the way pop culture had affected me, and thinking about that, and looking at our work, and I want to read this, and it has to do with Kent, and it has to do with what schools mean to us, colleges mean. So here, from Robert Venturi in a 1991 interview, I feel very lucky to have been educated in Princeton, where he went, in a place where we weren't getting the word. In other words, the style or this monolithic educational condition observed about teaching at what he was talking about, Harvard and MIT. So he went to Princeton, and it was much more fluid as opposed to Harvard and MIT. As the end, as this quote keeps on going, as the end of history and the creation of a new order. So that was what he was feeling, and then continuing, we were getting at what was appropriate for the time, seen in context of the evolving past. And by implication, we could evolve and grow out of the present. And I kind of think that that's where we were at Kent, because Kent was kind of an experimental place for faculty, certainly for students. the Creative Arts Festival in '70, which we both were affected by tremendously, brought together people like Robert Smithson, the very famous Earthworks artist, Alan Capro of Fluxus, right?
I remember him taping little plastic bags with dollar bills
Yeah.
in them to trees one
Sure,
day all
sure.
over. And I followed him around watching him do that. And then,
Yep.
then I noticed this guy that I was in a band with was climbing the trees, stealing the bags of money before they... And Alan didn't even care. He just kept taping his
That was
bags
probably-
of money up. He
yeah.
tried to make it more dangerous for
And there were other people there too, like, John Ashbery, the Pulitzer Prize poet. I know you're influenced by Morton Subotnick.
yeah,
right?
electronic musician,
Yeah, and
pioneer, composer, weirdo.
and like just before that, just before he came to our campus, he was one of the founders. I don't know if you guys probably know this, of Cal Arts, which is like the California version in some ways of Black Mountain College, and that was back in the late '60s.
He comes out to your neck of the woods now and then, because I had never talked to him when he was at Kent for his, doing his thing.
Right.
But I had breakfast with him at Mothersbaugh just a couple years ago, and he was really a delightful guy. And he remembered the time, and he remembered Kent State. He talked about what a vibrant art community was going on then, and that it was. He said that was a really special place.
This
and
was
time.
like 1 year we had all these people here.
Yeah,
you
I'm
know.
not impressed with Princeton, Harvard, and MIT.
Yeah.
Those three. It's
Yeah.
like the kids that want to go there. There are a lot of. I don't know. Anyhow,
They
it's
want
like,
the word.
This is like the school. This is
Yeah.
like more like it's like a real school. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not here.
Well, that
sing praises for your school, but
Yeah.
it's like this is like the
Sure.
kind of, because what you need is you need great
Yeah.
teachers, and you need facilities, so that I think in art, whether it's music or dance or whatever, you
Right.
need you just need some facilities and some great teachers, and
right.
to be able to learn the techniques, and you find it in yourself.
Sure.
But so,
Well, and indeed,
so yeah, Kent was a great.
and the
It
teachers
made my mind.
and the teachers brought these people in. It wasn't so their influences were the people that they wanted to bring in, much like you and me are here, and how we bring in visiting artists here as part of our faculty. It's kind of the same tradition, of extending our faculty and our kind of interests and sharing that with the students. And that's what we got at Kent, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Patrick Cully, the teacher you were talking about, he had materials and techniques class that was for
The
grad
same
students.
class we took, yeah.
Yeah, I took that the year of the shootings.
The materials and techniques and painting, and there was no painting.
There was no painting. It was like
No painting,
I mean, now, there's more conceptual
right.
art classes, but back then that was a pretty rare thing.
Yeah, and it was like, word on the street was, you're not going to do what it says, right? The syllabus, we didn't have syllabi back then. did
He's really ill right now.
we? Yeah.
But I remember going to his house once, and he was building this, like, a tree house that was on the ground. But it was like this thing it was kind of like a Joseph Cornell box that was a piece of architecture that you could walk in and
I remember sitting with him talking about work, and he was telling me a story of, he smoked Camel unfiltered cigarettes like crazy, right? And he was telling me the story.
anything to get in the way from your cancer.
Yeah. And anyway, so he was telling me the story of, his wife had this heirloom table. I think it was like cherry or walnut or something. It was a family heirloom. And he was telling me he was smoking a cigarette, and he forgot the cigarette was on the table. And you know how cigarettes have this line burn, they just keep burning. Well, it burned a ridge into this heirloom table, right? And kind of like, Marcel Duchamp's, large glass, it destroyed the table from being an heirloom now this imprint of the ridge. And he said, yeah, now it's perfect. It's like, it's got this heritage in it.
Yeah, that's Robert Cully.
That was Bob, yeah. Inspiration. Got a question about that. To be an artist is not a matter of making paintings, in this case, paintings is part of the quote, or any other artwork at all. What we are really dealing with is our state of consciousness and the shape of perception. This is from Robert Irwin. So when we're making artwork, we're not really dealing with making an object, but we're really shaping ideas, bringing in a state of consciousness that transports what we're looking at to our lives and how we think about those things. Can you...
I could go with that.
Go with it, yeah. How do you feel about
your work? It's hard to talk about it because it's such an abstract idea, and everybody has their own things that motivate them, and their own things that are burning inside their gut, and their own ideas. So, you can say that, and that's absolutely true for him, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's not. Maybe he doesn't even know what he's talking about. But it's like, is everybody here an artist, or a portion of you, or some sort of, in some? Not really? Okay, so one of you, two people raise their hands. Okay. So, it's like...
Don't want to admit it, yeah.
For me, art comes from a wide range of things. It comes from a combination of, my early art came from joy and just being able to celebrate vision. And then later on it became like something happened where I'll try and make this short. I went to I accidentally went to a full gospel church. It was a recruitment service. I thought it was a free dinner. It was like they were looking for, and I played organ in my family's church when I was a kid, and I knew all the songs. But I went to this church meeting, and what struck me about it was, after this guy did it, we ate the food, and then they started talking. And this man stood up, and he's got like a suit on and everything, and he, looks like a school teacher or a principal or something, or a businessman, and he's talking about how Jesus is going to be coming back soon, and that we should be prepared because and he went on like that for about 30 seconds, and it totally shocked me and amazed me. I thought, what just happened? And everybody acted like that was okay, because somebody immediately jumped up as soon as he stopped, and they interpreted it. And then, as soon as that guy, and he said, he's saying that the Lord will be here and soon, so we have to be prepared for it. And as soon as he finished interpreting it, somebody else jumped up, and they had a whole different foreign language. They were ooby da 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 da, ooby da 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 da, ooby da da da, and and I don't know what you know about Full Gospel Church, but it's this idea of surrendering the intellect to the Spirit. And there's something about that that I didn't know, I didn't know that, I'd been in church all my life. I'd gone to church, and I went to this Swedish Christian, very conservative church where dancing was frowned at, and the sermon every week was, "You've got to work harder. You will get to heaven through hard work." And so it was like kind of numbing, because it was the same story every week, and it was not that inspiring. But I loved this idea. And then it's like, they broke us into groups, and they were like trying to convert us to Full Gospel Church. It's Full Gospel. And they started going around this little circle, and it got to, they wanted me to speak in tongues, and I'm like, I didn't know many foreign languages. I didn't know any foreign. So my only foreign language I could come up with was yabba dabba doo. You know, I did Fred Flintstone, and they just kind of looked at me like, okay, well, they went to the next guy. And then but I remember that week I was in downtown Akron, and I was walking. I lived in an apartment building down there, and I was walking over to an apartment building that I had to paint apartments in, because that was my day job. So I could, you know, when I wasn't at school, I had a job to help pay, so I could pay my school tuition. And I just remember this homeless guy ranting. And so I just walked really slow so I could listen to what he was saying, you know, to see if there was anything there that I could get any information out of. And I became very interested in this whole concept of the idea that, you know, like 10% of your brain or 18% or whatever the number it is, they change it depending on what article you're reading, you know. How is all you use in your brain? And I thought, maybe that piece of the brain that we all are using right now to sit here and face forward and listen and whatever, maybe that part of the brain is just a babysitter for the other 80% that's having all the fun, or that's like doing all the really cool things, and it's somewhere really great.
Yeah.
But you know, we're stuck in this part. We're stuck in the part that's babysitting the body that keeps the other part of the brain alive. So I had this whole idea about this for a long time, and I was interested in people that stream of consciousness writers and speakers and poets, and like Thomas Pynchon, Gravity's Rainbow was really fascinating to me. And you know, it's like even when we started writing songs later on, I remember we were thinking of Thomas Pynchon when we wrote the lyrics for Whip It. We just thought of it as being like one of those stupid little like nursery rhymes that would be right in the middle of a serious story, you know, in that book. And but that was my inspiration, things like that. And I was always looking for what part of art was a clue to why are we here, you know. I was always looking for clues to that. And it's kind of why, well, this isn't, maybe I'm jumping out of, but that's kind of why I became fascinated with starting a band with a couple artists that I was at school at Kent with. We wanted to talk about de-evolution, and you know, there was a a reactionary reverend in Ohio named Shattuck, and Reverend Shattuck, and he wrote all these amazing pamphlets that were illustrated and that were like ridiculing evolution. But the way he did it, it gave us all this information about de-evolution. And so we started thinking of, well, if science isn't really satisfactory with coming up with answers, and religion isn't totally, you know, isn't really satisfactory, maybe there's this other area that brings it all together. And so we started, and then we found this book then a few years after that. We found this book called The Beginning Was the End, How Man Came into Being Through Cannibalism. And it was this Yugoslavian anthropologist who wrote this kind of crazy, but kind of right on it book, kind of like one of those things that are like, it's got a lot of flaws in the book, but there's some of the information, the idea, his whole concept was, and he based it on Neanderthal men in Europe. When they dig them up, there was so many of the skulls that they found were always had holes punched in them, as if somebody had punched a hole, to get inside to their brain.
Uh-huh.
And he had this theory that when Homo sapiens came up out of Africa and went into Europe, that they started eating Neanderthal man, and this guy's writing this. I don't know how old he was in 1972 or whenever the book came out, 71, whenever the book came out. But he's writing. He's kind of basing it on homeopathic medicine, where you take pills with calf's liver to make your liver stronger and all that kind of thing. And he was saying his theory was that these Homo sapiens were coming up, they were killing Neanderthal man and taking their brains and eating them, and that what it did is it was both an aphrodisiac but at the same time it made their brains expand, and so Homo sapiens' brains expanded faster than their skulls. And he said, because of that, Homo sapiens, and that's all of us in this room, Oscar Kismaeus, that was his name. He disappeared into a Tibetan monastery after he wrote the book, but that's true. That's a true story. It actually says it on the flyer for the book. But he said that we are the only species that is out of touch with nature. We are an insane, brain-eating species of ape called humans. And when I thought about it, I started looking around at what was going on. This was like a few years after we had been at Kent State, and we were like protesting the war in Vietnam, and they shot like 33 kids and killed 4 of them and closed our school down, and we were like, what's going on? And it was such an amazing place. John was there. He knows what I'm talking about. These people that he's talking about. Like if you were doing stone lithography and stuff, you were working with Dan Rohn,
Right.
who was this you'd have an hour-and-a-half long class with this guy, and it would drive you crazy because he couldn't speak. He stuttered.
Mm-hmm.
He'd be like, and so...
And
you take...
Yeah, that's exactly right.
pencil... And people would
Yeah.
kind of freak out, and after about 15 minutes they'd say and put it on the plate or something, and he wouldn't let you. He got pissed if you tried to help him.
Mm-hmm.
It was awesome. It was draining to go to his class.
And
Then at the end of the semester I was in, he came out and he wasn't speaking.
Yeah.
It was like our last class.
Yeah.
And he set a dulcimer on his lap.
That's right.
He set a dulcimer on his lap, and he started going, bling, bling, bling. It's 3 notes that are drony, and they're just doing that. He starts going, my true love rides a lion at midnight in the forest. And we're like, what? That's the most words he's ever said in a whole,
true.
class. It was
Absolutely
incredible.
true.
And then who did he work? He worked with, not Robert Indiana, Jasper Johns, right?
He worked with Rauschenberg. He
Yeah.
worked with Johns. He was a master printer,
He was a master printer. So
and he was exceptional. And
it was tough to take his class, but
well,
he was intense.
I have to say this: he's the one who taught me how to fly fish.
He taught you what?
Fly fish. He was a fly fishing perfectionist. Knew everything about it.
Right. You don't have to talk when you're fly fishing.
No.
Did he relax when he was out there?
Completely. We would go to
man.
Pennsylvania.
So it's just classes he could.
Yeah, we would go to Pennsylvania and fly fish and do all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. That was.
And he had a scholarship to go to to Yale, where he graduated from with his MFA, and he had a scholarship in music and in art, and he chose art, and he could sing beautifully, and he's just really amazing. So
Yeah.
it's like a light switch. He went from impossibly, getting words out to wonderfully, poetically, singing them. I want to introduce this quote to you based upon what you're just talking about, actually, from Agnes Martin. wonderful minimalist artist some of you may know. So here it is. You must especially know the response that you make to your own work. It is the way you discover your direction and the truth about yourself. And this is, in other words,
Okay.
do you, well, okay. Do you
Wait a
have
minute, what did you, okay.
Let me read it again.
Okay, read it and be a little louder because
Okay.
I was in my first rock band 52 years ago. And when I was a kid, I thought, you
Yeah.
can't hurt me. But, yeah, my ears
Here it is.
have been
You
burned.
must especially know the response that you make to your own artwork, your own work,
The response you make to your own artwork?
to your own work,
Okay.
okay? It is the way you discover your direction and the truth about yourself. The response to your own work is the way you discover the direction and the truth about yourself. Could that be your reaction? For example, the response to your work gives you feedback, right? And that kind of feedback that you get.
You said you didn't mean like how I responded to my work, but how other people did.
No, how you respond to
Okay.
your work. Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you something about my artwork. When I was at Kent State, I went from K through 12 to me was like, you know, because I had these thick glasses. I was the shortest, skinniest, tiniest kid in my whole school. I had to wear corrective shoes, so they were like giant, you know, so I looked like a cartoon character. And I had an invisible kick me sign on me. And it was Lord of the Flies for me from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. I had no interest in going to college, but I knew I knew that I couldn't think of one single person in Vietnam that I wanted to kill. I remember I actually really thought about that. If I have to go to Vietnam and I have to point it and I shoot somebody, could I do that? Could I? And I thought, you know, I maybe they have a bad political setup there, but I don't want to kill them. You know, they got to work that out. You know, that's not for me. And so I didn't want to. And by some miracle, my art teacher in 12th grade had put a piece of art of mine in some local county arts show, and wouldn't you know it won a prize. And I was kind of, oh, that's interesting. And then she used that to make an application for me. I didn't do it myself because there were 5 kids in my family. We were blue collar, you know. Both my grandparents were coal miners, and then during the Depression came to Akron to get jobs at the rubber companies. So nobody had ever talked about going to school, and I didn't have plans until I was thinking, I don't think I want to go to Vietnam, and the only way I could get out of it was if I was a student. That's really what I was thinking. And so I took this partial scholarship that I got offered. I went to Kent State, and I thought, well, art, I guess. I don't know what that means. I guess I'll major in commercial art because that means you have a job. But I didn't know what that meant either. And then my first quarter, I was in this, I'm at school, and I signed up for printmaking just kind of randomly, and that's how I met Ian Short.
Right.
Well, Ian Short then became the one thing I learned, and it's true for this school too, for anybody who's a student here. One thing I learned is that there's kids that are sitting there and they're in their art classes and they're like working on their little art projects and they're all lining up to print. You know, they take their turn to do their silkscreen print, and then the bell goes at what time is the bell over at the end of the day here? 3:30 at Kent State it was.
Well, whatever the class.
Whatever it is.
There are no bells anymore.
Yeah, whenever your last class was, you know.
Yeah.
3:30, it meant all these kids ran out the door so they could go to their fraternities and sororities and their favorite, the Draft House, or that was the name of one of the bars. I think that's the one where Joe Walsh's band played.
Sure.
And, you know, they went off, and I had the whole art department, and definitely the whole printing department to myself, which printing is like this thing where you're like burning a plate, you're like making a screen, you're like masking off the screen, you're like printing a color, you stack all the paper up, you clean off the screen, then you make another plate, and then you do it again. And, it could take you weeks to get one piece of art done, if you're in a class with like 20 or 30 people. But if you're at school all by yourself, I found out I could print a whole piece of art overnight. Okay.
Right.
Goulardi, when he taught me how to blow up model cars, it's like, I just remember these, they had these decals. You dipped them in water,
Yep.
and you'd slide them off like a racing stripe, or the number 17 because it's a, like a street racer, or it's a something car, or
Hot rods.
flames.
Yeah, right.
You get decals with flames you could put on your little model car. Well, one of the first things I researched and learned how to do was to make decals. And I started printing art on because everything for me, I was still, because of my eyesight, and like even now, it's like when I move my glasses like this, I bend the balcony about 10 feet down on the sides because it's like a radical prescription, but it gives me 20/20 vision, so that's the trade-off. But so I was used to working on smaller pieces, but so I got decal paper, and I printed in lacquer inks.
Right.
So I printed men and astronauts because of the time it was like
60s.
late 60s.
Yep.
I would print astronauts standing on the moon holding potatoes. That's actually, and so I'd print those, and then the sun would be coming up, and I'd go out, and I couldn't stand it. I had to put them on. So I started putting them up all over campus.
And we would see those things, kind of like Keith Haring back then. Yeah.
So that was how I made art, and that's how I showed
Yeah.
it back then. I would like make these. Some of them were men puking in front of a picture of the moon, and some of them were cows, because there was this guy Craig Lucas who I liked.
Lucas.
And he had
Craig
a
was a
sad,
painter.
tragic death. He
Yeah, he
drunkenly fell down a staircase
Yeah.
and ended up at the bottom of the stairs.
Yeah, wonderful painter.
Yeah, but he gave me this photo lid that was all ready to go of these cows. And I put artwork around them, and I made series of cows, and I put cows up all over campus too. So,
That's great.
so that was, but why am I telling you that? Wait a minute, what was the question?
There was no question.
Okay.
But I have another question.
Okay. Walls without ideas.
There we go.
Oh, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. That's not what it says.
Oh my God, it does. Way to go.
There you go.
All right. Subliminal subversive quality in your work. Have you always been interested in that? And you kind of just answered that question.
Yeah, I think it was partly like in response to always being on the kick me side, on the receiving end of the kick me thing, that it kind of made me like want to retaliate.
Yeah.
So I had an anger.
So that was your voice out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and it's like it was those doing paste up, like Shepard Fairey, but just like about 35 years ahead of him. It was like that's how I ended up meeting the guys that I started Devo with. This guy Jerry Casale and his friend Bob Lewis, because they came up to me in art class, and they go, "Are you the guy putting up pictures of astronauts holding potatoes on the moon?" I go, "Yeah, what of it?" And he goes, "I like potatoes." And so we started talking about it, and so the first thing we collaborated on is he was a grad student, he was graduating, and I was a sophomore, but he was interested in how I was making decals. And so his grad student project was he took high school pictures of the kids that he didn't like, and he blew them up and into poster size, and then I printed potato men, like these green potato men with arms and legs, And
Yeah.
we put him on the photos, and that was his grad student project. But he was really valuable to meet, because even while I was in my first year, and I'm like, gosh, could I even teach school? I think I would be a terrible teacher. I know I would be a horrible parent, but I'd be a worse teacher. I couldn't be so I don't know what I'm going to do when I get out of here. But it's like, he introduced me to something. He said, you got to take a class with this guy, Robert Cully.
Right.
Who he knows was like an amazing
A
human.
savant in more ways than one.
Yeah.
I mean, he was
He
like...
says he said there's this grad student class,
Yeah.
material techniques, and I said, I'm not a grad student. And he goes, it doesn't matter. They're doing all the pre-registration by computer. It's the first year they're using computers to register for classes. Just fill in all the blanks that you have, all the prerequisites, and they'll let you in the class.
Yeah.
And they did. So I was like so my first quarter as a sophomore, I was taking grad classes, and then I kind of forgot about the curriculum for what it took to graduate, and I just took every art class I could take. And my parents never paid attention. They were just like,
Yeah.
so you're making enough money to pay for, and I didn't have to make very much. I had a job in this horrible apartment building that was like 100 years old, with like apartments that were $78 a piece. That's true. There was like, if they had a bedroom in the apartment, they were $98 a piece. And the plumbing was horrible, and the carpets were horrible, and they all needed painted, and they all needed... So I learned a little bit about a lot of little handyman stuff as I destroyed carpets and
Well, I think that's, from my own experiences, and that's the reason why Ideas Without Walls, I thought that, that is certainly where I'm coming from in my teaching, and I think the relationship between disciplines and curriculum and prerequisites is maybe a necessary evil of the institution, but at the same time, I think it's something to fight against. And as we blend these kind of experiences, they're a wellspring for other things all the time, like you were just talking about. Not having to go through prerequisites, circumventing those.
I mean, we're all
I know
different.
this is heresy, but...
We all need different things from a school,
Right.
but kind of in a general sense, we need kind of the same thing. We need information, and we need ways to mobilize what's inside you,
Right.
and so you can be who you're supposed to be.
So talk a little bit about the relationship between your sonic art, your music, maybe back then or even now. We were talking about sound and image, with some of the prints that I was doing up there in the studio,
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
and how sound influences imagery and imagery influences sound.
Yeah, when I got my first pair of glasses, the bad thing that came with it is I started taking piano lessons. And I hated taking piano lessons, because all it meant to me was I was sitting in a room with Mrs. Fox, who for $2 a week would come over, and I'd learn bone, sweet bone, bone, sweet bone. And she'd sing along with it in this really out-of-tune voice. It was horrible. And my friends would be outside, like, walking by the window, like waving, like, fuck you, assholes. And so I thought music, like between 7 years old and about 12 years old, I thought music was something that was invented just to torture me. I thought that, because none of my friends had to take music lessons, and I thought, fuck, music is horrible. And then it wasn't until that changed when I was 12. We had 5 kids. They were noisy and I was the oldest one, and everybody was crazy. And my dad took a little portable black and white TV set, and he'd set it on the kitchen table, and we'd all like watch TV, and it would make some of the kids shut up a little bit, The older ones would kind of be quiet. We'd watch, and somehow Ed Sullivan was on in Akron, right, whenever we were eating dinner. I don't know, and he'd be like, okay now. And you know, they'd be like all those variety shows. But I remember one week he goes, and now something special from Liverpool, the Beatles. And they came out and they did I Want to Hold Your Hand. And I was like, that's the most amazing thing that ever, that's why I've spent my whole life learning how to play piano. So it's like so I immediately called up my friend Ronnie Wyszynski, and he had an accordion. And so we went to Woolworth's and we bought sheet music for Hard Day's Night. And he came over to my place and we had a little living room organ, a little inexpensive living room organ at my house. And he had an accordion, and we were sitting there. We could both read enough music to be able to go, it's been a day's night, and I've been working like a dog. And we're like, after about a week or so, I went, oh my God, I wasted my whole life learning the wrong instrument. It was like, and so I was super depressed. I couldn't believe it. And then it was like, the Beatles were a big deal back in those days. And like a week later after that, I'm like, we're sitting at dinner, and I'm just doing like everybody else, eating. And then, you know, the Beatles come on, and they do, okay, it's the Beatles are back by popular demand, you know, Ed Sullivan said. And then they play, what was it? I think it was Help. And I'm like, why didn't I learn how to play a guitar? How come I learned how to play all I can play is the piano? I wasted my life. I threw it away. I remember thinking that when I was 12, that I had thrown my life away. And then, so, you know, on those shows, you know, it was like Saturday Night Live where, you know, the band comes out, plays a song, and then, you know, then the Chinese plate spinners and Topo Gigio, the puppet, comes out and cracks jokes. And then near the end of the show, they go, okay, and here they are again, the Beatles. But this time when they came out, there was something different. And what it was, there was somebody, one of them was sitting down. They normally, it was like two guys at one mic, one guy at another mic, one guy sitting behind some drums. So cool. Perfect. It was perfect. You know, it was like, and that was, to me, that was the most amazing thing in the world. And then, but this time, something was different. I'd seen them, you know, do two songs like a month ago, and then I saw them do one song, and they were exactly like I knew they would be. And then they went to do their second song, and one of the guys was sitting at a card table, and I'm like, what? What's going on? Something's already going crazy. And they're playing this song called "I'm Down," which was like the B-side of the single, and so. They're playing, and they come in close, and it's John Lennon sitting down. God knows why. You know, he's sitting down, and it's not a card table. It's an electric organ. And I'm like, he's sitting at a keyboard. He's playing a keyboard, and it's an organ like the one in my parents, but it's cooler than that because it was a Vox Continental. If anybody knows what that is, it's like this little portable fold-up compact organ. But I'm looking, I'm going, oh my God, only the Beatles could have that because the black keys were white and the white keys were black. That was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I could not believe it. I'm like, oh my God, the Beatles are gods. How did they do that? And then it came time for a solo. And of course, I know nothing about like Little Richard. You know, I'm like listening to stuff like Annette Funicello and like How Much Is That Doggy in the Window and Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. That's the kind of music that they're playing on the radio in Akron. So I don't know about Little Richard and him being crazy. And John Lennon, in the middle on his solo, he's going with his elbow up and down the keyboard in the song while the song's playing. That's part of the solo. And I'm like, Mrs. Fox never told me you could do that. I just remember calling up Ronnie Wyszynski and going, the Beatles had an organ, they didn't have an accordion. And so that's how I got into music.
Yeah.
But it was like, for me, I never could I was always a visual artist, you know. So then it became like, well, I drew copies of Beatle album covers and stuff like that.
Well,
And so then music and art always stuck together for me. And then when I got to go to school, art became important because my teacher helped me get into Kent State. So I was thinking about art, and I was in that school, and it seemed like everything was possible. I remember the first year I saw this Fellini movie called Satyricon.
Right.
I don't know, did you ever see that? There's like no words in the whole movie.
No, you can't.
It's all guttural noises, and the music was this like, I think Nina Rota did the score, and it was like a lot of like very strange, non-traditional, primitive instruments with a lot of like sheep horns and things like that. And I was like, oh my God, what a world. It was like college was introducing me to this incredible world that I didn't even know about.
And that kind of inverted beehive in that movie where, and the hermaphrodites, and I mean, it's just blow your mind. Yeah, crazy movie. And that is a perfect segue to orchestrions.
Orchestrions, okay. Well, okay. So I got in this band. We thought we wanted to be an art movement. We thought, well, what are you going to be? You know, why not just call it yourself an art movement? I didn't want to call myself a band. I didn't want to be in a band. You know, I thought rock and roll was kind of stupid at that point because it was long after the Beatles and all the cool stuff was done. And but I was still an artist, and I loved making art. And while I was in school, we studied all the art movements in Europe between World War I and World War II. So it's like I learned about the Dadaists, of course, you know, and Bauhaus, and there were all these things that came up. The Futurists, their musical ideas were incredible, and the Suprematists in Russia that were about man making fun. They were kind of making fun of man claiming to be the center of the planet. They, you know, I don't know if you ever saw Victory Over the Sun.
Yep.
Yeah, Victory. It's kind of like this guy crashes an airplane, but he goes, "Hey, I'm all right. Nothing happened bad, and we've got lights in the bedroom, you know." And so they were pretty. So I loved all that stuff that was going on there, and we wanted to be, well, not Art Deco, not Art Nouveau, but Art Devo. So we were going to be Art Devo, and we thought we were going to be like an agitprop group. We didn't think we were going to be a band by any means, and that's why we were making films right away. Anyhow, so what did you asked me about the art? Okay, so anyhow, so I was in this band. So then I'm going to go through my history really fast. So I was in this band. Then it had a lifespan, you know, like you've seen the movie Spinal Tap. You know, it's like you start off, it's kind of cool, and then you're somewhere over here, and then you're like crawling around trying to find your tail again, and it's sad because, you know, it's like you can never be, it can't be 1977 again in 1985. Even though you want it to be, it can't really be. You have to be something different. But it was a strong concept. The band was still, as an artistic movement, it was like a really strong, I mean, you know, there's a lot of people that would say Devo unfortunately has been proven right, you know, that things have devolved since we started the band. But that's not what I was always kind of a optimist, hoping that we were wrong. But anyhow, so I went to the band, and the band went down. And this guy, Pee Wee Herman, hired me to do a TV show, and then it just took me in this other direction. I hadn't studied music in school, so I didn't know how to orchestrate, but I finally ended up doing orchestral music, and I got into this whole career. But in the process of it, I've scored like 100 movies and like 100, more than 100 TV shows, I'm sure. And there are boundaries, you know, no matter if people come up and say, "We want you, Mark. We want you to give us something we've never heard before." Like that's even what they did with you know, Thor. You know, it's this guy Taika Waititi. I really wanted to work with this director. He did this amazing movie right before Thor movie called Hunt for the Wilderpeople, And I don't know if you saw it. It was like a small independent New Zealand film, and it's like this kind of Maori kid who's like a troubled kid is in a foster home, and the father at the foster home is like kind of hates the kid, but the mother loves him, and then the mother dies of a heart attack in like the first 10 minutes of the movie, and so this crabby old man and this kid are together, and they're coming to take the kid away from him, and he realizes that kid shouldn't be with the foster people, that they weren't really taking care of him, and so they go into the outbacks in New Zealand. But so there's this lush outback, and the music he picks is all like Michel Jarre from like 1970, and all this music that's like very simplistic, like arpeggios and stuff, like very simple early electronic music. And you first hear it, and it's jarring to hear that with this beautiful lush green. And then after about 5 minutes, you realize, oh, Taika Waititi's a genius. So when he called me up and said, will you work on a movie with me? I was like, yeah. And then so we met over Thor, and he said, we're going to turn Marvel upside down. We thought we were. And but I got to say, I both really enjoyed working with Marvel people, because I have to say the guy that head of the company, Kevin, he loves comics, and he loves that world. And although I was never like into like guys, muscle men in tights, that was never my thing. You know, it's like I never, and I have to say Marvel music was terrible for a lot of their movies because of the way they did it, which I found out by working with them. What they wanted me to do, and I refused to do it, was they wanted, instead of writing music for every scene, that's how I like to work. I like to write music for what's really on the screen, but they said, well, we don't have time for that, so can you just write a suite of music, and then we'll cut stuff in, and I'm like, that's why Captain America sounded like wallpaper. And it's like, and it was, because I remember, I have 2 daughters that are teenagers, and my neighbor has 2 boys that are teenagers, and every now and then the moms would get together and talk all of us to go see one of their films, or they'd be forced, their boys would have to come see Frozen. We had totally different worlds, like we go over to their house, and these 2 kids would be like, World Wrestling Foundation, and they'd have all these little toy dolls of World, and my kids would just be staring at them like they were like insane, and then they'd come over to our house, and there'd be like let it, how's it go? Let it snow, let it snow. It's like there's that shit's going on, and they're like, so they were like, we had totally different worlds. But I'd gone to like a couple Marvel movies where I'd fallen asleep early in, and it's going boom, ba-da, boom, ba-da, boom, ba-da, boom, and then you wake up, and it's going boom, ba-da, boom, ba-da, boom, and I'm like, it's been 20 minutes. That's the most boring music I ever heard. Anyhow, but you have certain parameters you can work within. That's the reality of being in Hollywood. You can push things every now and then. And like even in that movie, there was one planet where Marvel said, okay, we've never been to this planet before. You can use the sounds you want to do. So they kind of let me have a little bit of free reign there. And that's the only electronic kind of weirdo section in the movie. But, okay, doing all that, I kept wanting to do other things in my life. And especially with music, I just felt, I wish I could, even in Devo was great. Before we had Whip It, the record companies left us alone and we could do anything we wanted, which was really great. And so I experimented with electronic sounds, and like, I was like a futurist. I felt like I was a neo-futurist, like the Italians. I was trying to find sounds for our culture and our time that fit it. And so I put mortar blasts and V2 rockets, and we opened up for Sun Ra one night, and I remember watching him play like this on his organ. So he was like pounding it. I'm like, that's awesome. And so I started doing that because he was so amazing. And but I was working on something for Wes Anderson. I'd done I think I did 4 or 5 movies with him, and then he had this one. Something where there's these 2 kids and they're in like summer camp. One's a boy camp, one's a girl camp, and they fall in love, and they run away from summer camp together. And he sent me this footage where you're looking down through the trees and, you know, at the kids running across this woods, and you're watching them run, and the trees are going like this, and there's birds everywhere. But he didn't run a camera to get the, what do they call that, the ambient sound? Anybody in film class here? Yeah, and he didn't run a camera for that, or he didn't give it to me, and it just, there was all this motion and action going on, and I thought it was kind of weird. I was trying to think about music for it, and instead, I saw these birds, and so I collect esoteric sound-making things. I have for a long time, and I have about 200 bird calls that are just in the basement at my studio, and every now and then I play them on something like a commercial, or I think I used them in like Pee-wee's Playhouse or some things like that, not too often. But I started playing these bird calls, you know, along with the picture, and then I was recording, and then I started playing them, and then I started organizing them so that they, and then I lost interest in the movie altogether. All I wanted to do was write music for bird calls. I became really obsessed with it. And so I took all these bird calls, and I'd have them in my studio, and I'd go, and then I'd have another one that would go, oh. So it'd be like, and I was making all these rhythms because it was like, because it's kind of, there's kind of notes in bird calls. You know, you have notes, but they're not like on a keyboard. You know, it's not like you can like, and then if you do put them in a keyboard, like if you do sample them and then like put them across the keyboard, then they become boring, because then it's like those things where they do the dogs, where they make them sing songs, you know, with barks and stuff, and it's stupid sounding. And so instead I was trying to figure out how could I need 40 people to come in and each hold a couple bird calls, and I give them sheet music, and I say, this is your this bird call, and this is this one, and this one, see, this is, don't play it so loud on these parts, but really like blast it on these ones, and I'm thinking, that's too expensive. I'm not going to be able to find 40 people to come in and play bird calls for me. And so, collecting esoteric instruments, I had this calliope. I used it in a Rugrats movie when they were in a theme park in Paris, and nobody else has ever wanted to. It's so freaking loud, you know, because it's like a real steam calliope, and people, they go, whoa, that's amazing. I go, you want it in your movie? No. I think it went into, the only other one I used it in, the only other movie was Saving Mr. Banks. I don't know if you saw that movie, but I played the merry-go-round music in it. And so it never gets used. But this guy repairs stuff like that, and he works at amusement parks repairing things. I said, hey, you know, I'm trying to get these bird calls to work. And he said, oh, that's easy. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you know, you just use, like you would for a pipe organ, you just use the same kind of wind source. And then if you need things, like if you need to move a lever or need to, he says, we can make little devices to do that. And so this guy, he came and helped me make devices that would play, like I think we did 65 bird calls on the first orchestrion, what you're talking about, on the first sculpture that I did that had bird calls on it. And they're midified, so you can play them on a keyboard. And so I was in the process of doing a retrospective art show.
Myopia?
Yeah, it was called Myopia.
Right.
Appropriately enough. All right, I'll wrap it up. I can take a hint. And so that's how it all happened.
And
The end.
I have one more question, then we'll open it up for audience questions. The new work that you're doing here,
Yeah.
it's really amazing work. Matt, students, everybody has been kind of working hard for the last couple of days, and it involves these amazing colored backgrounds, you know, with single images. And I know the whole idea was to play, you know, just like we wouldn't know what it was going to be like.
And that pretty successfully happened.
And it pretty successfully happened. And so maybe kind of tell us a little bit about how this came about, because obviously he didn't know what the final out. In fact, you're still going to work
Yeah.
on them too.
Yeah.
And so you've got this kind of configuration of different things: screens, line art, your hands, and so forth. What can you kind of add something to that?
Yeah. It kind of follows what I'm trying to do. I have a studio where I can write some music that pays the rent, and then I can say to my engineer, mix that into the film, and then I can go in the other room, and I can, while he's mixing, I got an hour that I can work on artwork. I draw every night. I almost thought this was what we were going to talk about earlier when you were asking me about how I view my art, because somewhere around very early, it's like 1972 or something, I got involved with mail art. I don't think anybody does that. There's a couple people that do that now. There's a couple Devo fans that send me, God bless them, mail art every week. And I don't even know if they know I keep their stuff, but I have like big binders full of all this amazing artwork that's like anywhere from postcard to something size that they send through the mail. But back then, there was no internet, so the mail was like a real legitimate way to send and receive things. And I found out when I was a nobody in Akron, Ohio, just a stupid kid nobody, that I could send I could send a postcard with some art on it to Robert, Indiana, Jasper Johns, a number of other people that were involved in that time. Out on the West Coast was like Irene Dogmatic and Image Bank up north. And these people, you would send them a postcard, and there was a good chance they were going to send something back to you. And I remember getting a postcard from Robert, Indiana, and thinking, he sent it to me. It's got my name on it on one side, and it's got his name on the other side. And that was so amazing. So mail art was, and it was also at a size that with my prescription and with my one-room apartment, I could, I could work on stuff like that big. And it became a collection of drawings and collages and writings. And I'd mail them out to people. And then then we were starting Devo right about 73, 74. And somewhere in that time period, I sent some cards out that I'd written lyrics on. And I remember thinking, I should have kept those. And so, being the nerd that I was, I had collected stamps when I was in junior high, so I knew that you could go to the stamp collector's shop and you could buy these red binders that you could archivally, when you got 100 of these cards, I could put 100 into one binder. So, zoom ahead to 2018, I have about close to 500 binders with 100 cards each that I've been saving, and that became Devo and my Image Bank and Idea Bank, like, cards with freedom of choice or red cancelator helmets, and all these things came out of, lots of lyrics came out of these, like waking up in the middle of the night, like my $150 shipmobile, the brakes weren't working, and I was just slammed into the back of somebody, and then I woke up, and then I made a piece of art right after that, and then went back to sleep. And so I had this image bank, I still do, I have this image bank that I thought nobody was ever going to see, because every girlfriend, my wives, everybody, they got used to seeing me drawing things all the time, and then just putting them in my pocket. And at first, when you're first dating somebody, they go, "Oh, let me see that," and then you show them, and then they go, "Oh, that's weird," and then and then after about 2 times, they're like, "Oh yeah, he's drawing something weird again."
Yeah.
And so it became this thing where I thought it was the best world ever, where you're making art. And you don't have to censor yourself for a gallery. You don't have to censor yourself for a teacher. You don't have to censor yourself for a record company. You don't have to censor yourself for anybody else. You just, whatever is in your head, I was not afraid to put it on paper. And I started 72 or 73, somewhere in there. I think 72 are the earliest ones I have. I have collages and paintings I did back then, and I started collecting them. I stopped giving them to people, so it's like when people would come up to me and they'd see me drawing, go, "Oh, could I have that?" And I go, "No, I'll give you something else, but you can't have that," you know. And I kept them for like however many years that is. I didn't do the math before we came in here, so you'll just have to imagine that it's a bunch of years. And so I thought we were going to talk about that, because that's the thing. When I did this myopia show, it kind of fucked me up a little bit, because the curator of the show, this museum director, he said, "I think we're going to have to put all your books out there." I go, "No, I've never shown them to anybody. You can't. Those aren't." I go, "There's images in there." I go, I'm an art teacher on a little kids TV show called Yo Gabba Gabba. I'm going to have little kids coming to this show. The Devo fans can handle it.
Yeah, right.
Jerry draws erect penises on his just about every picture that a Devo fan brings over. So you know, you get that whether you want it or not. But you know, it's like I'm like, you know, I got like kids, you know, that watch Rugrats or whatever. So I didn't really want to put it out there, but I was kind of careful what pages I let be shown in it, and it was kind of a weird experience. That was my weird.
So have the big ones that you're doing now are really
they're kind of
another
like,
generation.
They're kind of from that world of, and.
What do you think the scale does now? I mean, they're really impressive.
Well, you know, is anybody here an artist? Two of you, I remember.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, it's like, in the world of art, scale means everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Jeff Koons' little balloon dogs. If they were only this big, they would just be manufactured in China and sold at, you know, like crap stores everywhere.
Yeah.
But you know, when you make them as big as this room, then that's something else. But I like scale too, because then it takes it away. It pulls it away from me. It pulls it out of my hands. You know, it's like I have. Oh, I left them in my coat in the back room. I can't believe I'm that far away from them. But I have cards that I'm drawing on right now every day.
Yeah. And
I just always do it, and I just, you know, now I kind of try to do it when it's not obvious. I'm not around people, so I look less autistic. And but you know, it's like this idea of doing bigger pieces.
Right.
It is more of like kind of saying.
Well, it's more of a world too.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I think we can get into your world. You know, more of us into that big space. Did it help? Yeah. No. I don't think so.
I think it's okay just the way it is.
I think so. And being as okay as it is, let's open up the audience for maybe a few questions. Yes. Okay, do we have a mic? Is there a roving mic somewhere?
I really generally don't need a mic.
No, but okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll talk about it. This doesn't seem like something you generally have a problem with, but my technique can be very tight sometimes. Do you ever run into that, and do you have any strategies for working around sort of escaping your linear brain?
It's tight? What does that mean?
Like I become so wrapped up in the idea that I'm trying to communicate that I cut myself off from being as creative as I could be. And my best artwork tends to be when I can sort of abandon that overarching, very almost fascist part of my brain that wants it to turn out very exactly like this. And I find the art is much better when I escape that and I just start, you know, get into a flow state.
Yeah, you just gotta, you know, it's like everybody's got their own weird brain, and you got your own things to deal with. You know, I think you just have to look for clues. You know, like when is it that you're loose? When do you feel loose? Like when you're in a moo-moo, or what do you mean?
It's when I can trick myself into making art without expectation.
Yeah, how do you get? Are you ever there? Ever?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's the answer.
But then I always relapse.
Yeah.
Just good rather than really good.
Yeah. Maybe it just means you just have to recognize those times whenever you're going to be loose and do the stuff you want to do, and figure out what it is. If you're like chopping heads off of chickens all day, and that's when you're feeling tight, maybe you should like change jobs. I don't know. I know there's something. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist, damn it.
Yes.
I did his first movies. I did his earliest movies, and it was great. I'd been doing movies for a long time before I met him, and I feel like I helped form his aesthetic. I think I helped form his taste in music, and he was definitely an interesting character always, and he reminded me a lot of Devo, because we traded away our royalties to keep artistic control of our art. Like I remember the record company executives going, okay, now wait a minute, let me get it right. You say you'll take less money if we let you design your own album covers and posters and all your merchandise art. You'll take less money if we let you do all the work that we normally pay our graphic design department to do. Yeah, I think we could work that out, Mr. Mothersbaugh. But he was like that. It's like, I even remember, God, I can't remember which movie it was. It was one of the ones where we were over at Disney, and he got in such a fight with the head lawyer there that I remember hearing people at Disney making fun of the fact that he had, in his contract, had said, and the lead lawyer at Warner Brothers is forbidden from having anything to do with my contract for this movie. And everybody was just like, that's impossible. So they just signed it just to humor him, But Wes was like really smart, and he is one of the smartest guys out there in the filmmaking world, and he takes a lot of hits for it, but he's the kind of guy that he's part of everything in his movies. I remember when we were doing Tannenbaums, I came to visit him in Harlem, where the Tannenbaums' house was, and we were walking through the house, and he's showing me all the rooms, and we're talking about it. And I'd already been sending him music, because as we got to know each other more, I'd read the script, and then I'd start sending him music so that he could put it on his headphones while he was shooting. And we're walking through the house, and he's going to shoot a scene with the little boys up in their bedroom, and they had bunk beds, and the one kid, his bed was up against the slanted attic ceiling, and so he had drawn all over and I remember we walked in and we're talking, and Wes is distracted, and he's looking at that, and he goes, okay, move the bed, paint over that for me. And before they started shooting, he repainted what the boys' paintings were on the wall, because he said, that's not what those guys would paint. That's not what those kids would paint on the wall. And he painted it like what he thought was the artwork that, I don't know, what were they, like 7th grade or something in the movie? Like whatever those two kids were. How they would have drawn on the ceiling. He changed it himself. He was always meticulous about details, and I think he regretted he couldn't play an instrument. He would try and play. He'd come into the studio while I was writing stuff, and he'd play like one note on a bass, and we'd put it in, with the real bass player, and like when we did Hey Jude, he had to go woo, just put he put some Michael Jackson woos in it, just because he had to be part of the sound too. He's a great guy.
Good.
He's a little bit, he's got his own weirdness, but
We're back
he's
there.
lovable.
Yeah, you're going to have to go up to the mic.
Hi, Mark. You've collaborated with a lot of really incredible people in your musical life and in your visual art life and just in life in general.
Yeah.
Can you speak to how the spirit of collaboration affects you in any of your studios or in any particular work, and why you continue to collaborate instead of just...
Okay, I'll tell you where I think collaboration came from in my life. Even the first band I was in, there was 2 sets of brothers, really. that were in the band. And early on, myself and Jerry were the two main writers for the songs. And we wisely decided to give split our publishing equally among all the guys in the band so that they would want to participate. And I think it really benefited us. I think because that would make these guys that they're making something for playing the drums, and it's like if you work with musicians, like when I hire musicians, like an orchestra, like I got an orchestra in London starting up on the 3rd of September. These guys, they only do what's on the paper. You can't ask them to do anything else. But in my band, we were like comrades, and we all we were all there for the same purpose. And so there's not any single Devo song that I could say was all mine, or Jerry could say was all his, or we could say was all ours, because everybody in the band always helped us. And so that made me always feel good to the idea of collaboration. I know a lot of songwriters, they're used to being fully in charge of the aesthetic and protecting it and defensive, and they get in, with Andy Summers. He scored a movie Down and Out in Beverly Hills at my studio, and Bob Casale and I helped him because he'd never scored a film before. And he wrote this great score. He really wrote a great score. And the director came in and said, this isn't Nick Nolte's character. It should have something, he's thinking something different than this sound. And Andy got so upset and pissed off, and he fought with the guy. And, in the end, they came up with a score. But Andy, I don't think he ever scored a film again, because a lot of artists in bands, they aren't really collaborators, and film is a collaborative business. I like it. I like listening to people go, okay, Robert De Niro had an upset stomach, and he had diarrhea, and can you help this love scene work? And you can. Music has a lot of power, so I enjoy that. And so for me, visuals and sound always have gone together. So I enjoy, whether it's and I worked with a lot of artists that came from that school, like Brian Eno, who is. You're kind of similar. I'll tell you what's similar about you and Brian Eno. You guys both have your oblique strategies. Have you ever seen his oblique strategies? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've only seen them on coffee cups, so they must be in other form too. But
they're in my lectures.
But in his lectures, he has his own kind of oblique strategies that are inspirational, and actually maybe that's it. You need some oblique strategies.
There you
Talk
go.
to this guy. Yeah. That could be it. Yeah. And so I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of people that kind of straddled both worlds.
Great, thank you. One more question, because let's take one from this side, okay? Can you go up to the mic, please? So we can hear you?
Yeah, you with the long hair. Here we go.
Nice to meet you, Mark. We had in early 1980s, I was director of the USS Intrepid Sea Air Space Museum, and Dolby had a new system, and they wanted to do the setup on our theater for us as a donation. Well, they asked me for a tape so that they could test the system, and the nearest tape I had was yours, and we blew the socks off that aircraft carrier with Devo. You've heard it all the way to Trump Tower.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
That was an observation. We'll take one more question. All right. Can you get up to, go ahead. Get up to the middle here. And I'm sorry, we've been doing this for a while here, and we're probably...
It's probably everybody's butts are falling asleep by now, right?
One more, this is it.
So I was wondering, what was the process like for creating the various looks of Devo? Because the looks were always kind of changing with each record.
The different record album covers?
Well, we never wanted to be a rock band. a matter of fact, when we thought like in the mid-'70s, we thought rock and roll's over, I'm sure of it. It's all decrepit now. We need something new to define our culture. And so we didn't want to look like a rock band. And we, like I said, we were interested in these agitprop groups from Europe, from Paris or Berlin, and they would wear costumes on stage, and so we didn't want to, that's why we wore costumes. We wanted a different look, and then we also wanted to look like a well-oiled machine. We wanted to, we all wanted to be interchangeable. Thank God we couldn't afford it, but somewhere around 1976 or something, we thought we should all get plastic surgery so we look identical. We're serious, but we didn't do it because plastic surgery is a bad idea for the most part. But so we've always worn uniforms, and the yellow hazmat suits. I was working as a janitor. I was a maintenance man, and Jerry was a graphic design artist at a janitorial supply firm. And so we'd get these catalogs, and we'd go through them, and we're going like, when I got money, I'm going to have in my kitchen, I'm going to have a stainless steel sink, just like that one there. And I'm, what's that runoff thing? Oh, that's for like when you dip the tire in the, and then there's an overflow and it runs off. Yeah, I want that on my kitchen sink too. And we loved all that stuff, and then one day he came over and he goes, "Mark, check this out." And he showed me hazardous waste disposable outfits that they had for cleaning up hazardous material at the rubber factories. And it was just these yellow plastic Tyvek material pants and these shirts. And so we ordered some because they were like $4 a piece for a suit. And we're like, an outfit for $4, that's amazing. And so we got them, and then we just started getting, like those press letters, like you can still buy them at the art stores and hardware stores. We just DEVO, kind of at a slant like that, and we'd put those on 5 outfits, and then we'd wear them out on stage, and then when it got so hot that we couldn't stand it, probably right in the middle of Jocko Homo, we'd just like rip them off, and we'd have like crazy little weirdo gym outfits underneath, with these little black shorts and black T-shirts where so anyhow, so we were always into uniforms.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
Your sunglasses. Oh, they just, because it's in the light. They just, oh, it's so sad. I just had this hit. I thought you had on a new traditionalist dude.
Thanks very much for everybody that